I want to thank everybody for coming. My name is John Miller. I'm the president of the Kihei Community Association. So for those of you who brave the rain, I know when it rains outside in Kihei, it's a quasi-national disaster. You know, people don't know if it's safe to drive or not. But so I'd like to start off by introducing our panelists who we have here tonight. Who you're hearing over the telephone is Tommy Johnson. He's the Deputy Director of the Department of Public Safety, and he's going to be with us over a teleconference this evening. Wanted to also introduce George Fontaine. George is a retired Maui police captain. He's worked as a policeman for 25 years. In both his capacity as an officer and a communicator, he worked with MCC and its staff. MCCC and its staff. Chief Judge Rafetto serves as the Chief Judge for the 2nd Judicial Circuit in Maui County. Judge Rafetto created the Maui Molokai Adult Drug Court a little over 10 years ago and served as the drug court judge. Since inception, the drug court has provided high-quality drug treatment for about 650 Maui residents in the criminal justice system. To date, 335 participants have graduated from the drug court, and so far, 84% of them have not reoffended. Judge Rafetto also presides over the probation cases placed in the Special Services Unit. Danette Arrojo has spent a total of 5 years in prison at different times. Her son is currently in prison and is doing 2 consecutive 10-year terms. He has already been in prison for 25 years. Danette's husband has now completed 2 years of a 4-year prison term. Danette is in the best reintegration program and does lots of volunteer work in her community. She is currently enrolled at MCC, where she actively involved in Phi Beta Kappa and has sat on the Student Government Council for 3 semesters. Her grade point average is 3.8. Her goal is to get her associate's degree in human services as well as her certified substance abuse counselor license. She is also double majoring in administrative justice so that she can help make changes in the system in order to make it more effective. John D. Kim is a deputy prosecuting attorney, has been a prosecutor for approximately 17 years, has been assigned to Maui Drug Court since November of 2007. He is also one of the deputy prosecuting attorneys who assist in special services program by working with the probation unit to quickly modify. Take a break here. Uh-oh. We're gonna have to guess for the rest of this. Unfortunately, I see me risking the rest of my paper. I'm so sorry. That's really tough for Netra because now I'm going to have to ad-lib her title here. Netra's a Kihei. Netra, I'm sorry. I know I had this printed out. Let me go ahead and give you a chance to do your own introduction.
My background is in social work. I worked for Maui Youth and Family Services, Aloha House, Women Helping Women. I've been a social worker here for 12 years, and I am now working with Community Alliance on Prisons, and I'm helping work in the legislature to familiarize legislators with the issues that we're talking about here. And I worked in the MCCC as a substance abuse counselor briefly last summer.
Thank you. Carrie-Ann, I can finish your introduction, actually.
He found it?
Sorry, Netra. We're rolling again. Carrie-Ann Shirota, JD, has been advocating for smart criminal justice policies and community-based alternatives for prison for a decade. She has previously worked as an attorney for the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission and public defenders, and is the best of MEO's Being Empowered and Safe Recognition BEST program. As a current Soros Fellow, Ms. Shirota is conducting research and developing strategies to return our incarcerated population home from out of state, for-profit private prisons, and reduce the overall prison population. So I wanted to start off with giving Tommy Johnson, who is with us by phone, the opportunity to give him to share his opinion with us about the unene Public Safety Complex. Tommy, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there tonight. The Department of Public Safety supports the unene project because it would allow us to increase the bed space capacity on Maui from just under 300 to approximately 608. What that would allow us to do is to return the over 300 inmates who are from Maui, currently housed on the mainland, and put them in to a program-intensive environment where they can more readily reintegrate back into the Maui community. I should note that although the prison population has more than tripled in the last 20 years, the state of Hawaii has not built a new correctional facility since 1987, when the Halawa Medium Correctional Facility opened. These 608 beds that will be available at the new Maui project will allow us to move the current staff and inmates from the old site to the new site, and again, return the inmates from Maui who are currently housed on the mainland back to Maui. In addition, the new facility would employ an additional 141 staff. We would be able to lower the daily rate that we pay per inmate to house, feed, clothe, educate, rehabilitate, treat, and reintegrate from over $100 a day to approximately $89.60 per day. The new construction of the facility will create almost 1,000 new construction jobs for Maui County. In addition, the long-term economic impact to Maui would be the increase in the 141 staff will be permanently employed. So there'll be tax revenue. These people will buy homes. They'll use local vendors, services. In addition, the prison would use local vendors to buy meats, fresh fruits and vegetables, other food items, repair and maintenance, and contract with vendors on Maui to provide services both in the facility as part of reintegration and hopefully community-based programs as well for the offenders. Therefore, the Department of Public Safety believes that the new Maui facility will not only benefit the state population by allowing us to provide a program-intensive environment for them. We'll be able to return the inmates from Maui to Maui from the mainland. They'll be able to see their family members more readily back into the community. And the facility itself provides a long-term source of tax revenue for county business and for the state as a whole. It's our goal, eventually, to return all of our inmates home to Hawaii once we have the appropriate facility, infrastructure, program, and community-based resources to safely reintegrate the inmates back to the city. I hope that provides an explanation for why the department fully believes in the unene project and why we want to have this project built and maintained in the county of Maui.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening, and I'd like to thank KCA for putting this on. You know, this is obviously an important issue of discussion, and I'll try to see if I can fill in some of the holes. Deputy Director Tommy Johnson was unable to fill in because of the bad connection, and hopefully he can call back. I'd just like to preface this is that I'm not an expert on corrections. I was a police officer for 25 years. I feel unqualified to speak on behalf of Department of Public Safety on the specifics of this issue, but what I can relate to you is my personal experience as a police officer of how I had to interact with the staff and what the current facility situation is right now. What's occurring right now at MCCC is a situation of severe overcrowding that's occurring at the facility because there are just a lack of beds and a lack of space. This facility was built even before my time. I started in 1980 as a police officer, and I think this facility, and maybe Tommy can jump in when he gets back, was built like in the early 70s. And at the time, picture what Wailuku Town looked like. It was basically cane fields. There wasn't any subdivisions over there. And so they built this thing in the cane field there when they thought, gee, when is growth going to happen there? And now look at it. The current facility is presently surrounded by a subdivision. And as a result, everything is compressed. And there's no room for expansion right now anymore on the space that they have. The other issue what's going on is because the subdivision and the close proximity of a lot of people, we have issues with drugs being tossed over the fence. And pass through the fences to the inmates at that facility. This has been an ongoing problem at that facility. Even when I was a police officer, we would get these cases of drugs being smuggled in, being thrown over the fence, whatever you have. This new facility would mitigate that because it would be built on a 39-acre site with multiple layers of fencing so that you would have more space to make sure that the prisoners are completely isolated from the general population. And in an isolated area where you're not going to have a lot of people around, okay? It's important that everybody here tonight understand the difference between a jail and a prison. What we're talking about building here tonight is not a prison, okay? This is a facility that handles pretrial detainees who have been arrested by the police. The police don't hold them at the police station until trial. They go to MCCC to await trial or sentencing. We also have inmates that are been convicted and are waiting to transfer to go out. People that are usually convicted of felonies are transferred either out to Halava or now to the mainland to serve out their sentences. We don't have, except for sentences that are like a year or less, do we have those kinds of prisoners that are at that facility in most instances. One of the most important roles that the facility provides is a staging area for prisoners that are returning back from the mainland and are going through a process of reintegrating in society. Because of the shortage of beds and staffing at the present facility, that turnaround time, because there's no place to put them, a lot of times before the time they're even processed, they're getting released without going through the various integration programs, which includes adult basic education, GED, parenting, cognitive skills, substance abuse treatment, vocational training, the BEST program, Maui intake services. There are a wide range of services that facility provides, and having the larger facility would mean we would have more classroom space, we would have more ability to be able to service those people ideally before 6 to 9 months before they get re-released back into society. They would have an opportunity to go through this program and then do another 6 months after they're released and they're actually living and working in the community. The way it's happening right now, that's not happening at the facility because of the overcrowding issue. There's a lot of talk about people saying, well, why don't we take the money? It would be better spent on education and all of that. Okay, well, I'll deal with that in the questions later. But utilizing this money, as what the Deputy Director said, would allow us to create jobs through construction and also provide a more state-of-the-art facility that would run more energy efficiently, and we would allow us to expand programs that were specifically targeted at this. The funds that are used are from general obligation bonds. It's not money that's coming out of the general fund out of the state government. This would either be built by a private developer and leased back to the state, or we would issue obligatory bonds. You cannot use CIP, capital improvement bonds, for education or for other things. They are specifically for capital improvement. All of our state and legislators and senators support this. We went through a bipartisan approach with the governor. They've come to an understanding and agreement with this, that this is a good thing for our community, and I think we should support the state and our legislators and our senators with this program. Thank you.
Good evening. One is, I understand that they've had difficulty staffing the present facility, that there are a number of empty positions that are difficult to staff, which you can imagine why that might be the case. It's very important to have professional people there. And so I'm wondering if you're going to increase the staffing need by 50%, are you going to be able to find people here to take that on as a profession? The other question I have in my mind is, see, people who are in the jail go back and forth constantly to court to take care of their cases. And so the proximity of the present jail is pretty convenient. And it happens all the time that somebody's forgotten, that somebody didn't get brought over who was supposed to be brought over. If that jail is going to be way down at the drag strip, that's going to be much more difficult. Also, they transport prisoners back and forth to the facilities in other places and back to Maui. Just seemed it would be nice from my point of view if it was a little closer to the court and to the airport. And the other thing is, our courthouse has a holding facility in it, which we use during the day for people to be held in if they're in trial or pending doing something in the court. It's very small and antiquated. It was actually designed for 15 people, and we have something like 50 people a day pass through that. And so that's a bottleneck. The ability to have easy access to the jail facility would really facilitate. We're not going to get a new courthouse for years and years, and building a new jail in the courthouse is almost impossible. So that's just something I throw out as a consideration. I thought it might be helpful a little bit if I talked about the criminal, this is all driven by the criminal justice system and the people in our community who are in that system. So I thought I might offer a few data points for you which might be useful. Every year, we have about 850 new felony cases come into Second Circuit Court. Felonies are the serious crimes. Minimum potential sentence for a felony is up to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. It goes all the way up to life without parole. Then we have 4 judges handle all that volume. I would say about, Mr. Kim may debate with me on this, but I would say 80% at least are all drug and alcohol-driven crimes. And I would also say that 99% of those people are redeemable with good programs. And I think our drug court has actually proven that. These are nonviolent drug offenders in the adult drug court, and I can talk about the reason for that later. But we have an 84% success rate over 11 years, and those were all people who started out in the jail. And they're all people who in the criminal justice system who had committed multiple offenses to the point where they come to the attention of the police. The other thing I want to say is, no matter where we send these folks, if they go to Arizona or they go to Oahu or we keep them here, they're all coming back to our community. There's absolutely no question that this is a community problem that we need to address. And so the better job we can do of rehabilitation in our community, the better community we're going to be and the safer community we're going to be. Now, there's always a certain percentage that really should never see the light of day again, but they're usually pretty obvious. Everybody else, in my opinion, can be rehabilitated. I didn't necessarily believe that when I started out with the drug court years ago, but I'm convinced it's true now. That dysfunctionality can be corrected with a lengthy program that has the resources to do that. And if we can build that into an expanded jail facility here, then we can do a better job of that. Also, we don't have to send people out of the community. I can't imagine that sending people to Halava or Arizona is doing them much good as far as coming back into our community, although I know they do have good programs in those places. Just one final thing, to give you some idea of what the kind of success you can have with these programs is, I mentioned our 84%. One data point that always really strikes me is a few years ago we made a connection with Maui Community College, If you're familiar with the college at all, they do a tremendous job of outreach. And they've expanded. It's actually not even community college anymore. It's called University of Hawaii, Maui, I think. But we got connected up in our program with the college, and more than 25% of the people in our program, which is 120 people at the present time, are going to college. They're all working on a college degree. And these are people who are very dysfunctional to the point where they fell into the criminal justice system. So it shows you that it can be done. And any facility we build here should support that point of view and not punishment.
Aloha, everybody. I would definitely say I've been on both sides of the fences. I would say that the main thing that's needed in our community is the old saying that prison is a revolving door. Prison is a revolving door if there's no programs, if there's no reintegration, and reintegration doesn't start when you're out of prison or when they make you sit in prison and do crap. Reintegration starts in prison, and reintegration follows when you come out of prison. And if that is not implemented, then you have the revolving door. I think there's more ways to spend our money, like creating new programs. Drug court has been successful. Creating more drug treatment programs, creating more reintegration programs. That's what's needed for inmates. An example I would be is that my husband escaped from Maui Correctional Facility, and yeah, he has an escape charge and he has a theft charge, and he's doing time in Arizona prison, and he has been sitting in one place for 2 years in high security, and they have not moved him. He is trying to, he works his 12 steps on his own. He has not been given any programs. He has not been given any reintegration. And yet, they want to let him do his term because prosecutors said, oh, they should give him 4 years, but he had an open 5. But so, my question to them was, so you're going to let him sit there for 4 years, and you're not going to give him any reintegration, no programs, and yet you're going to let this man go at the end of 4 years, and you expect him to not reoffend? I mean, I'm not saying that he will, but I'm saying, I'm just using him as an example. There's other people like my husband there, and that's where reintegration starts. It starts when you're there. It doesn't start when public safety throws you in jail and just makes you sit there and transfer you from jail to jail to jail to jail and have no program. And there's something wrong with that picture if you're sitting there for 2 years and your points hasn't come down, and you're going to sit there for another 2 years and your points still haven't come down. There's something obviously wrong with that picture. There's more ways to be spending monies than to be spending billions of dollars on a jail system. Right now, I believe that money should be spent on reintegration programs and re-educating inmates about cognitive skills, about criminal thinking, about how to change your lives. And I have changed my life. I am an honor student. I am a secretary at Maui Community College. I am in Phi Beta Kappa. I've been volunteering in my community at the shelter and at MEO for 2 years now. I am a substance abuse counselor. I have come a long way from where I started, and it's because I had the reintegration programs. And if they cut the reintegration programs and they don't rehabilitate the inmates, then I would say that not only Maui County, but every county, Oahu, Hilo, they'll continue to go through that revolving door because they're not getting any help, the help that they actually and obviously need.
With basically all the panel members here with respect to whether or not we need another facility and where the money should go regarding reintegration programs. When I first started as a prosecutor, as a young prosecutor, all we want to do is throw them in jail and get them away from society. And that was part of our judicial code, the criminal justice system, and how the penal code actually worked, was punishment. In the early 70s, it was rehabilitation. When I came into law about 1985, it started to turn around to not rehabilitation, but punishment. We had our issues with crack cocaine, and then came ICE, methamphetamine. And you saw the laws change with respect to how we dealt with felons or with the methamphetamine problems. There was mandatory jail time. And we were filling up the prisons so badly we had to ship them out of state. In 1990, I believe the ICE project was started by the court system, social workers, MEO, doctors. There was Dr. Schlesinger sat on the board, and it was about a seamless transition from the penal system back into society and how that would be accomplished. And from that came our drug court. When I was assigned to the initial ICE project as a prosecutor, I says, and with the police department, we're on the same side. It's like, we don't want this. We want to put them in jail. They've been stealing, hurting people, and we represent the victims as prosecutors. So as a prosecutor, our philosophy and our policy was to represent and be the voice of the victims in court to make sure they get their justice. And most of the times it was a pound of flesh. When I came back from Corporation Counsel, I moved on, and then I came back to the prosecutor's office. I was then assigned to the Maui Drug Court program. And Judge Rafetto can tell you, when he saw the look on my face, he said, I'm going to have problems with this guy. He wants to throw everybody in jail. But he said, give it a chance. We need to send you to maybe a seminar. That never happened because of the economy. But as I sat through the drug court program and watched how these clients, basically, they're called clients, so these defendants, I call them, how they were treated and how many times we've offered them the programs to get off and to rebuild their life, get off of their addiction and rebuild their life, to be contributing members to society. You could see on the graduation how much they've turned around and how much the people that they've hurt, actually basically it's their own family members, have turned around with them and decided to support them. It's very touching every time you go to a graduation and to see the change that occurs with education, drug treatment, and sober support. But our program is unique. I call it our program because I'm part of it, is that we have the use of Maui. We have Dorm 3 and Dorm 5. And those dormitory programs initially treats the drug addicts, our defendants, and they come to grips with themselves. They learn a new thinking process, and that's very important. But they can't do it on their own. Those who are out or try to do it on their own, inevitably they end up in a dormitory with a timeout because initially they think they're too smart for the program and they won't give in. But when we catch them and they come around and we give them their timeout, 30 days, 60 days, they turn around, and it's big surprises to see which defendants actually make it and turn around. So if you ask me on a personal level, I support the expansion of the prison, of the community center, correctional center, because it's overcrowded. But because of our dorm system, the way treatment is handled, it makes a tremendous difference. We have approximately 120 to 130 clients in the drug court. We have another 60 to 75 waiting to get in, and it's a long process, anywhere from 18 months to 2 years, and it takes at least that much time to turn a person's thinking around. A lifetime of addiction can't be changed with just a short stay in prison. And as my colleague here says, a reintegration program is very important, but it can't be done in a setting. I think they need to have a hammer, and that's part of the special services unit. And that's a different type of program, but the intensive probation supervision. And when they come in, what Mr. Miller lost his notes. He said, when I serve on that portion, that program modifies the probation. Instead of revoking probation, they start over again. They're still on probation, they get a timeout, and then they get a taste of what prison is like. Anybody who's been incarcerated at MCCC or anywhere else, it's not a nice place. It's not a place you want to go. The only thing that was shocking to me was after 2 years in this Maui Drug Court program, we've had clients who said the 1 to 2 day timeout in the jail is not too bad. They'd rather do that than do community service. So we've turned that around and now making them do community service. So our philosophy does change. It's evolving, and I think we need to support the facility. Thank you.
Okay, my goal, I look at the big picture, and my goal is to have more public safety for the community. So I look at what's going to create stable families, intact families, and a place where we all feel safe and there isn't crime. So I step back from just look at this one particular project and facility, and I'm going to highlight what Judge Rafetto mentioned, which is the city and county of Honolulu. On their website, they say crystal methamphetamine use in Hawaii has risen to unprecedented levels. 38% of all arrestees in Honolulu tested positive for ICE. The National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse said that 65% of all inmates, these are all national statistics, but Hawaii is not that different. 65% of all inmates met the medical criteria for substance abuse disorder, and 20% either had a history of substance abuse or their crime was related to either drugs or alcohol intoxication. So that's 85%, so pretty much agreeing with what Judge Rafetto said. But only 11% are getting treatment. So basically we have, like somebody has cancer and they go, get a flu shot or a Band-Aid or something. There's a disease, a public health disease, which is drug addiction. And as Mr. Kim was mentioning, at one point in the history of our criminal justice system, they decided let's just throw them away, and they all come back. So it's definitely not the best case. And the other thing is, this is a national problem. This is not just a Hawaii problem. CASA report found that in 2005, federal, state, and local governments spent $74 billion, not million, $billion on incarceration, court proceedings, probation, and parole for substance-involved adult and juvenile offenders, and less than 1%, $632 million, on prevention and treatment for them. So this is just becoming a really big problem in the whole country, and many states are going broke. And the one thing I wanted to highlight is, maybe we could have this great prison with all these programs, but the reality, and we all know this now, is we only have a certain amount of money. We have to make a priority with our money. And there's an organization called, Council on State Governments, and they have a program, Justice Reinvestment. And what they do is they work with various states and they do a data-driven analysis of their criminal justice system, of all the offenders, all the criminal files, and they find out where's the money being spent, where are these people coming from, which neighborhoods, because usually most of the people that are in the jail come from certain neighborhoods. They come basically from the poorer neighborhoods. Another thing to highlight is in Hawaii, though Hawaiians comprise less than 10% of the population, they're approximately 40% of the people in the prisons. Now that's the same in California, it's going to be blacks and Hispanics. So basically it's an economical issue. Poverty breeds crime. I mean, it's just how it is. So that revolving door that people were talking about, Danette was mentioning, of reincarceration, it's caused by poverty and substance abuse, which is poverty, and trauma, which is intergenerational trauma just being passed down and down and down. And so until that's dealt with, crime's certainly not going to go anywhere. So what this Justice Reinvestment did, they worked with various states. They worked with Texas. With Texas, it was approximately $500 million that they were about to spend. They were same thing as here. The prison population was getting higher and higher, and they were about to spend $500 million on incarceration. So Justice Reinvestment came in, looked at everything, analyzed it very scientifically, and found that they could save or that's the amount that they could save with these programs, $500 million. So then what Texas did is they took half of that and they put it into community-based programs. And that's another thing I want to highlight is we don't need lots of fancy programs only. I mean, we certainly need programs in prison, but I remember when I was working at Aloha House or Maui Youth and Family Services, and if we had a client and we realized that person needed drug abuse treatment, there wasn't places to send them. I mean, I worked with Lucy there. There wasn't places to send them. I mean, Aloha House, they are qualified to have more substance abuse beds, but their funding has been cut. I know that's part of the economics, but even before that. So we need programs before people get to prison, because prison is extremely expensive, and we as a state cannot afford to be wasting money when we can just deal with people, nip it in the bud. You know, as soon as somebody has a problem, bam, immediately get them into substance abuse treatment. And then another thing is that it needs to be, okay, one more point. Regarding the legislature, HB 1818 is about, it requires that the Department of Public Safety ensure that reintegration programs in Hawaii correctional facilities combine cognitive behavioral, that Danette mentioned, with Native Hawaiian holistic interventions that address domestic violence, addictions, and self-mastery through identity and community connections. So it needs to be relevant to the people that are using them. So, okay, thank you.
Aloha. Thank you, all of you, for being here, and I'm grateful to see some new faces. After going to many meetings over the years, actually a few meetings, relating to this issue, new faces are here. And it's encouraging to me because you want to gather as much information as possible and make informed decisions about whether to support or oppose this prison. And I say prison because we can split hairs and talk about terminology, jail, prison. Go to MCCC, go to some of these jails, and I can tell you the conditions are very similar, prison, jail. And there are some people with more than 1 year at MCCC. So for me, pardon me, but I'm going to call it a prison. To me, that's what it is. My response, do I support the prison? No. Prisons are making us poorer, not safer. I'm going to say that again. Prisons are making us poorer, not safer. For years, I've been studying this issue. And at the same time, I still don't consider myself an expert. I consistently read reports by criminologists, by the Department of Justice, Hawaii State Legislature, attorney generals, you name it. If some kind of new study is out, I want to get my hands on it. And the reason for that is I want to make informed decisions. And I also believe that as community stakeholders, as taxpayers, we want to make sure that our money is being invested into programs, policies, thank you very much, that are cost effective. And we're all here, I believe, because we want to live in safe neighborhoods. We want our children to grow up to be able to play outside and know your neighbors and not there of a fear of being accosted or something happening to our children. I also believe that we're here because we want our children to have quality education. And as we've all seen, there isn't an infinite pot of money. More money spent on prisons means less money for education, for new schools, and for our college system. And I can't roll out all of the data tonight because we only have 5 minutes, but I can assure you, if you look from state to state, there are a number of jurisdictions that have kept spending money exponentially on prisons while their rate for education has decreased. And what does that breed? More despair, more poverty, broken communities, broken families, and I think that's something that we don't want. So what are the alternatives to building this prison? First of all, we need to look at what creates a larger prison population. Contrary to popular belief, it's not an increase in crime. Nationally and locally, crime rates have gone down for almost 2 decades. If you'd like more information about this, take a look at the Attorney General's Crime Index reports. Crime rates in Hawaii have decreased. And in many other states, some people believe there's an assumption that if you lock up more people for longer periods of time, your crime rates are going to drop. Not always true. In some states that spent more money locking people up, their crime rates went up. Why is that? Because we're diverting funds for social services, for education that uplift, empower individuals, families, and communities. Prison is costly. We spend approximately $40,000 to incarcerate a person each year, and we spend about $10,000 to educate a child in our public school system. We spend 4 times more to incarcerate than to educate. And I guarantee you, if we flipped that formula and spent more money in education, we'd have far less people in prison. Going back to the myth of overcrowding, there is overcrowding currently, but it doesn't have to be that way. We incarcerate many people, men and women, and especially the female population, for non-violent crimes, pretty much drug-related. So these individuals could be better served in the community. If we want to create jobs, create more educational, vocational programs, invest the money in Maui Community College, invest the money in the BEST program. We've heard tonight a personal story about how BEST makes a difference in someone's life. The reality is that BEST budget has been consistently slashed and may be in danger of closing shortly because we keep spending money on prison and not programs that work. Same is true. Why do we have a wait list? There are men and women who need drug treatment. They're on a wait list to get into Aloha House. Why don't we have more providers? We need more competition in that. If we're looking at increasing jobs, prison is not an economic engine that's effective. There are numerous studies that looked at longevity of towns that, quote, invested in prisons. And over a 15, 20-year longitudinal study, those researchers found that communities that invested in prison, either their overall economic base decreased or there was a net zero. In contrast, they looked at communities that invested in community colleges. And consistently, those communities that invested in community college, their economic financial stability and wealth increased. So again, if we're going to take that money and spend it, why are we spending $230-something million on building a prison when we could reduce the prison population by, 1, changing sentencing? That's a major driving force of why people in prison, not because of more crime. And let me just illustrate, because I think this really brings it home for me. Okay. In 1975 in Hawaii, we had 300 prisoners. 1975, 300 prisoners. Today we have over 6,000. And it's not because crime increased, it's because of policy decisions that were made to, quote, get tough on crime, lock more people up, but in the end, we all suffer. So let's invest in more effective both cost-wise and in terms of uplifting our community instead of wasting our money on a system that doesn't work. Thank you.
Well, built into our future budgets will be requests for funding for the different rehabilitative, educational, and restorative programs to include reintegration services and community-based resources. But to be perfectly frank, those appropriations will depend largely on the legislature because there's no guarantee that we'll get the funding that we request. I think it's safe to say that since prisons are not revenue generating by nature, that the facilities themselves do take to some degree a back seat when it comes to funding for programs. Hence, the state hasn't built a new facility in over 23 years. I think one thing people should understand is that in order to protect the public, prisons have to operate, and jails, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So while the cost of building a new facility may seem high, people should note that you have to build the plumbing, the construction, and infrastructure to last 30 to 40 years, and that prisons and jails, unlike office buildings, schools, and other type facilities, don't close on the weekends. They don't close at night. They don't close on the holidays. They have to maintain operations 24/7 because we have constitutional and state mandates to provide a certain level of services and protection to the offenders. So thank you for having me, and then if you could collect those questions up and email them to me, we'll be glad to respond to you, and you can get them back out to those folks that asked them.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the panelists, if you feel like you have information that you can add in the question. Most of these aren't directed to any individuals, so if you want to give the opportunity, you can answer that question. First question is, would they be bringing prisoners from other islands to be held in the new Maui facility at Pu'unene?
I don't know what the current number is, but the last one I heard was that we had 450 people in the facility at the present time, and it's always way over what it was designed for. And given the number that actually go to prison off island, I wouldn't be surprised if it would be filled up with just Maui.
Just Maui inmates?
Yeah, I would have to concur with that. Considering that when the prison was prison, I guess I was splitting hairs, was built, the population of Maui at the time was probably, 60 or 70,000 people. Now we have a population well over 100,000 plus with the tourists and the growing population. And the bottom line is you're going to have a certain number of people that are going to end up being incarcerated for various crimes, a certain percentage of your population. So as you get population growth, you're going to get an increased demand for the number of beds. I'd also like to note that very few property crime offenders are sent to prison on their first or even sometimes their second offense. They usually are sent to prison after they have reoffended several occasions, been put on probation, violated their probation, went back into the system. I know I was a detective for 6 years, and I saw these people continually coming in and reoffend until they were finally given a prison sentence.
One data point that I forgot to mention is just for your information, we have right now 2,333 Maui citizens on probation in our county. That counts the whole county. And the last I heard it was around 250 people on parole. The recidivism rate of people on parole and probation in our state is over 50%. I handle all the probation revocations for our county, so I know this subject pretty well. They basically get 2 chances. If they don't follow what they're supposed to do on probation and go to drug treatment, go to alternatives to violence, do the things that they're supposed to do, then they get sentenced. For misdemeanors, that's up to 6 months in jail, and for felons, it's a minimum of 5 years. Burglary is a B felony, by the way. If someone breaks in your house, that's 10 years. So 2 chances, maybe 3, depending on the circumstances, and they would be sentenced to prison for 10 years. And I guess under the plan, that person would stay in Maui, even though they've been sentenced for 10 years. But hardly anybody does the full amount that's sentenced, you know. The parole board lets people out. Very few people do the full sentence. Depends on a formula that's applied, but very few do.
That's good. I might move on to the next question, if that's all right with everybody. We have plenty. Are sentencing laws already written in place that would require prison terms? How difficult of a process would it be to change those laws?
I can respond to that. Possession of any amount of methamphetamine used to be a mandatory 5-year prison term. That's the reason I started the drug court, is because in Honolulu they had a drug court so you could get into a treatment program instead of go to prison, and we didn't have one. So I wanted to get a program started so we didn't have to send people from Maui to prison when they didn't have to go if they happened to live on Oahu. It's a crazy situation. They've changed it now. There's been a realization in the society generally, and in the legislature where it's important, because that's where the law that makes no sense. And so there are no crimes unless you have prior convictions on your record. Then we have mandatory minimum terms of sentencing, which the prosecutor can tell us about if you'd like to know more. But generally speaking, for property and drug type crimes, there's no mandatory sentencing.
Okay. Else about anything? Why is there no money for the BEST program? There are a few questions I've read that ask for the BEST program. And why can't we build a jail for half the money and the rest on human services program that actually help people to stay out of legal problems? And again, that brings up a further question in my mind that I'm not sure if somebody can answer. But if it is determined that, say, we don't want to build a prison, what will happen to that money? Do we have a choice to reallocate that money, or is that just going to disappear?
On to the first question regarding BEST. Mm-hmm. We actually have, we had the CEO of MEO and the director of BEST, Ken Hunt, so he probably could best respond to that. But let me just tell you, when I was the director at BEST in the outgoing year, there was a $1.2 million expenditure from the state legislature allocated for the BEST program. And the Department of Public Safety never released all of the funding. The Department of Public Safety never released all the funds and have been stonewalling efforts to increase funding for BEST. And that was going on from a few years ago. So people can paint a picture of integrated prison road programming. We support rehabilitation. But you know what? You follow the money and find out where people really, what they really think. And I know Tommy, and this is not personal. I look again at the money. I look at what they actually do. Not only has PSD opposed funding for BEST in the past, over the last few years, I track legislation every year. They have opposed accounting of audits to find out where does the money go for these $50 million contracts with CCA, which is the Private Prison Corporation. They've opposed funding for RAD, which is an intensive substance use treatment program in prison. They've opposed restorative justice practices. They've opposed cultural programming. I can send you, if anybody wants to see the documentation, I can even send you their testimony, what they submit. And you know what, honestly, as a taxpayer and member of this community, it's really shameful to me. Because I believe that there are more people here who believe that yes, people do wrong, let's hold them accountable, but let's also make the punishment fit the crime. And how long are you going to punish a woman who's using drugs, who has been sexually abused, physically abused, and that holds true for many of the men and women in prison. I also consider myself a victim's advocate because my experience working with men in prison is that most of them have been victims, but nobody intervened on their behalf. And so sometimes you have drug use as a symptom of underlying problems, or you have violence. But we send them to a place that's inherently violent, which is not something we want to do. So again, I think that maybe perhaps Ken Hunt from MEO could answer about the specific funding for BEST.
I can answer the question about the funding part of it. As I explained earlier when I made my presentation, this is a capital improvement project. So what would happen is either a private developer would come in and build the facility and lease it back to the state for X amount of dollars per month with a lease to buy option. And we've done this before with schools. We did it here for League High School. We had the same situation. Or we would issue bonds, and that would be bonds at a low interest rate to do that. If we don't do it and the facility doesn't come, yes, the money would go away. And I'd like to make a point is that, in all respect to the other panelists here, it's unfortunate that she's throwing out all this information and we don't have a fair and balanced way of Tommy to respond to it because he's not on the phone. So I'd like to have everybody keep in mind that there are two sides to the story.
My understanding, though, is that when a person is set to come out of prison, they do go through programming. It's just that it starts in the last year or something like that. And in fact, we offered to allow people who were coming out of prison or who were on parole, facing revocation of their parole, who are people under the jurisdiction of the Department of Public Safety, not the court system. But we actually expanded our drug court so that we could offer our drug court type drug treatment to those people. We've had a few people actually take advantage of that, and we're hopeful that we can expand that. And also, as Mr. Kim mentioned, the Department of Public Safety, when we went to them and said we would like to have a man's treatment dorm and a woman's treatment dorm at the facility, they agreed and they helped us to do that. We have a 24-bed dorm for men at the jail and 12-bed dorm for women. Now, those are for people who cannot maintain in the community. Those are people who wouldn't be able to come into the drug court program because it's an outpatient nonviolent treatment program. We are the only county that has dorm treatment available. So people who can't, we try to have them do it in the community to start with because we don't want to fill the prison up. But those who can't and who are going to cause harm in the community, we want to have a place for them so they spend 90 days in the dorm and then they come into outpatient. It's been very successful, and I just want you to know that the public safety has been very helpful and responsive for our needs on the drug court, which I think has been a significant, I'd say 80% of the people in our program are in that situation where they're just so gone on ice that they cannot maintain outside of jail, and they need a kind of intermediate step, which the dorms have allowed us to provide.
Next question. The community focuses on the great need for those who have broken the law. After several years of lobbying, we still have no facilities to take care of veterans on Maui. And I think even in addition to veterans, it brings up another point in my mind, which is somebody pointing out the fact that we spend 4 times as much money per year per inmate on public school. So I guess my question would be, I think what this question asks in general is, are we allocating our funds as best as we can? Anyone like to take a stab at that one? All right.
I'll just say this. We have to have a way of containing people who cause harm in the community until such time as we can rehabilitate them. I don't think there's any question about that, but it's hard to get your mind around what that means. And one way I can do that for you is, a few years ago, I wanted to know how many crimes the people who were in our drug court were in our drug court for. And so we actually sat down and we counted it up. At the time we had 60 people in our program. There was slightly under 600 crimes that they had committed, that they were charged with, that they were in the drug court for. Now, if you could probably times that about 10 and get a real idea of the level of harm that has been caused in our community by those folks. And with an 84% success rate, we were able to pull a lot of those people back so they're not causing harm anymore. But you do have harm in the community. There's just no question about it. And we need a facility to handle people like that, at least to get a hold of them so that we can have an opportunity to address them with services.
Why can't we start implementing cheap and expensive small things to educate inmates, like educational DVDs, online college classes, etc.?
Say that there's not enough material in the facility to actually change your way of thinking. Yeah, there needs to be more criminal thinking programs. There needs to be more cognitive skills, because once you have a criminal thinking mind It takes a lot for your mind to train your mind to go from negative to positive. And it's a constant struggle every day, because your mind automatically has a way of just going back to the negative. So the more criminal thinking programs that they can have, and the more cognitive, the better it is to be able to change your way of thinking, and then that way you can change your life also.
With respect to programming, there are some programs offered at MCCC and some of the other facilities, but there's always usually this challenge of access, and I think that's something that BEST did really well. They partnered with MCCC, brought in instructors, volunteers, but even in light of that, there are a lot of current things that are happening now where even the ministry is having difficulty going in ministering to people, having chapel services, classes that were in the past offered were basically shut down. And so I think there's always going to be the struggle, as long as you have a prison, is who gets access, who's there, what's being provided. We know that programs can work, but I think we need to take a step back. Why do we have to offer all these programs inside? We need to start offering them in the community, because research has proven over and over that, one, it's more effective, and two, it's less costly than prison. So if people want to throw their dollars into a system that doesn't work, then by all means. I'm not saying that we don't need a prison at all. I'm saying is that we have prison overcrowding because of deliberate policy choices, and that many other jurisdictions have done early release, earned time credit, you get shortened time for good behavior. And they have not seen fluctuations or increases in the prison, in crime. But that's because there's only a marginal correlation between increased prison sentences, longer sentences, and safety. And I just want to go back, because there was a myth that was perpetuated earlier, and that is that automatically crime rates go up because of increase in your overall general population. We need to look at percentages again, and we need to look at the real rate, and that is called the incarceration rate. And this is national and a quick international comparison. The United States incarcerates more people than any other country in the world. We incarcerate 2.3 million prisoners currently. We have an incarceration rate, which is if you take a certain number per 100,000 population. United States, it's 756 per 100,000 persons. The next country closest to us is Russia, 629, Cuba, 531, South Africa, 334. Hawaii, if we were its own nation, which many people believe it is, 332. So basically, Hawaii in it of itself, when you look at the per incarceration rate, incarcerates people as close as South Africa and Cuba. What does that say about us and our democracy?
Also, the parole board. The parole board's been slamming people, slamming them with time, and that's part of the revolving door. Is that they just slam them with time instead of the people with nonviolent crimes, releasing them into the reintegration program instead of just slamming them. I don't think slamming them with time is going to do anything, really.
Sorry, I just had one thing. You may not know this, but when if the judge sentences someone to probation, it's 5 years and up to a year in jail or 18 months, depending on the offense. But that person stays under the jurisdiction of the judiciary, and then we get them into programs if they're on probation, or they can go into the drug court and so on. If they're sentenced to prison, the jurisdiction of the person in Hawaii transfers to the Department of Public Safety. The judge has no say over that person after that. And then they come before the parole board, and it's the parole board that decides how much time a person actually spends based upon the sentence that the judge gave. Now, there's some ins and outs to that. There are certain times when a person gets a mandatory minimum based on their record. And there's a hearing before the parole board, and the person has a right to be represented by a lawyer, and they can make their pitch. And of course, if like a person who's on parole and he comes into my drug court and he's doing well, next time he goes before the parole board, that helps. Or if he's done well in his programming and so on. I just thought I would make that as a point of clarification.
Question we heard a lot of from the audience was, is this going to be a for-profit facility Who's going to be running it? Is going to be a privately operated or state-run facility? And I guess this would be a good question for Tommy Johnston if he was still here. But
It's going to be run by the state. Whether the facility is privately owned and leased back to the state is still under determination on the best way to finance this CIP project. But no, this would be run by the state, by Department of Corrections. They would be involved in managing and operating the facility. And no, it would not be operated as a for-profit. It would be operated as a government institution.
okay. Is there anybody else before we move to the next question? Carrie-Ann. Sure.
There have been different plans floated over the years, and at one point the Department of Public Safety was talking about possibly splitting, maybe having the pretrial run by the state and the felon side by a private entity. And there are insiders within the Department of Public Safety who do not necessarily agree with this concept and its credible resources, but there have been times that there has been talk about perhaps splitting it and running it one half by a private entity, although it hasn't been disclosed which entity it would be, although I suspect CCA.
Sounds good. Okay, move on to our next question. And general question about funding. Where's the funding going to come from? Substance abuse treatment, mental health, vocational programs of rehab, staff, and supplies. I know that the general funding for the prison is state. Are these programs county funded, or are they state funded programs? Can anybody answer that question?
It's across the board. I mean, some of the programs are funded by federal dollars,
Okay.
Department of Justice, Department of Labor, SAMHSA. Sometimes it's state monies, county partnerships, and there are also times from private funders through grant sources.
When we set up our drug court, one approach to funding that we heard about and we followed through with was we set up a 501c3 nonprofit corporation called the Friends of the Maui Drug Court, which some of you may have heard about. And that provided us with a vehicle where we could go to the public in general and ask for donations. And it's very helpful because government money has all kinds of restrictions on it. Just to give you an idea, methamphetamine destroys people's teeth, and so you have young people who've lost all their teeth. And so we use some of that money to get people's teeth fixed and get them false teeth if that's what they need, and other things like that. I think that the idea of using nonprofit corporations to go to the public, to provide public support beyond just what the legislature provides, has a lot of potential that really hasn't been explored adequately. And I just throw that out as a thought. It's been very helpful for us.
Sounds good. Anybody else? Question about funding? Okay, next question. We might as well hand the mic to Netra. Okay. I understand that there's a new prison jail on the Big Island that has been closed. Why can't we use this facility? Also, as the unene site is near the Raceway Park, what about the potential issue that this brings a factor of noise during late night races? But, well,
Okay,
why
I
don't
don't
we keep
talk
it to
about late night
the
races,
unene
but-
and the Big Island question?
Okay, so regarding Kalani Prison, no, I have not been there, but I have talked at great length to the warden. That prison had a sex offender treatment program, a substance abuse treatment program, an auto mechanic certification, 19 different work lines, and even at one point a ranch. So this was an excellent program. They actually rehabilitated people. So it was a very good program. And then a year ago, it was closed. And the idea was, oh, let's close it because we want to save money, but 90% of that staff has been reassigned. And all of those prisoners were promised, oh, don't worry, where we move you to, we'll give you treatment. They haven't gotten it. The legislature is not all excited about everything or supporting this. The legislature, as I was mentioning, a bill is going through right now. It's hopefully will pass. It's still alive at this point. Auditing the Corrections Corporation of America, the Hawaii's relationship with the Corrections Corporation of America. So there's some, obviously I mentioned about the murder of the inmate, the rape of the women. There's a lot of questions, and auditing
So you're at 2 minutes.
auditing the closing of Kalani Prison, because there's very many questions regarding exactly why that happened.
Also, again, if the department was truly interested in saving money, why are they closing Kalani but still paying over $50 million to CCA? Who profits off of that? They're shareholders. The CCA shareholders make money by filling prison beds. The state will say it's, quote, cheaper because they give you a flat bed rate per day. But that does not include the cost of transportation, additional programming, certain types of treatment. A lot of other costs are not factored into that per day costs. So it's negligible how much cheaper it is, because there are studies that were done by independent groups and said that other states that engaged also in interstate prisoner transfers didn't save much money. But they also conclusively showed that at private prisons, there were higher rates of assaults on inmates, on staff, higher rates of escape, higher rates of sexual assault, and most often the funding that states paid did not translate to programming. Several years ago in Oklahoma, our state spent over $1 million supposedly on substance abuse treatment programming for the women. They never got the treatment. They never got it, and what did PSD do in return? They rewarded CCA by then contracting with them for more people. Our state contracted to build specifically a prison in Saguaro in Arizona, just only to house Hawaii inmates. If you take a look at CCA's website, every week you can actually ask for an email update, and I actually subscribe to it so I can see how their stock is doing. They make money out of people returning to prison. Higher recidivism rates means higher profits for shareholders. We need to reinvest that money in our community to make our community safe for all of our children. So private prisons, whether it's building it or operating it, aole, it's not the way to go.
Here you go, George.
That whole discussion is kind of went apples to oranges here. What we're talking about here is a public safety complex on Maui to handle pre-trial detainees and sentencing detainees. We're talking about bringing prisoners that cannot come back to Maui because of a lack of bed space to allow them to come in and get enrolled into a proper reintegration program. We're not talking about long-term housing of felons there. As I explained in my opening comments, that happens in Alava, that happens on the mainland. But we have an issue now with bringing people back and trying to reintegrate them. And that's what we're trying to do. And you're trying to compare that prison to our intake facility that we have here, our public safety complex. It's a different animal altogether. It's a different kind of service.